At an open house, they mistook my realtor for my wife. She smiled and said, "Not yet." The moment the couple standing in my kitchen said, "Your wife has incredible taste," while looking at Elena, I felt my chest cave in because 6 months ago, I didn't have a wife anymore, and I didn't think I'd ever want one again. If you believe people can find their way back to love after loss, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment telling me you're watching. Share this with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Whispered, maybe if kindness and second chances mean something to you. Now, let's get into it. My name is Daniel Reyes, and 8 months before that afternoon, in my kitchen, I buried my wife of 11 years. Her name was Claire. She died on a Tuesday in October, quietly, in a hospital bed that had become more familiar to me than our own bedroom. After a 2-year fight with an illness that took everything from her except her ability to smile at me right up until the very end. I was 38 years old, and I had spent the last 2 years learning the geography of hospital corridors, the schedules of chemotherapy, and the particular silence that fills a house when the person who used to fill it with noise is gone. After she passed, the house we bought together in the suburbs of Portland became something I could no longer live inside. Every room held her. The kitchen still smelled like the cinnamon rolls she used to make on Sunday mornings. Even though I hadn't baked anything in months, her reading glasses were still on the nightstand, where she'd left them the last time she came home before the final hospital stay. I would walk past the closet and see her cardigan still hanging there, and some mornings I would just stand in the doorway and stare at them until I forgot what I had walked in for. My friends told me it was time to sell. My sister, Marisol, said it gently but firmly every time she called, "Daniel, that house is a museum of grief. You need to let it go so you can breathe again." I resisted for months. Selling the house felt like erasing Claire, like packing away the last physical proof that she had existed, that we had built a life together in those rooms. But grief, I learned, doesn't care about your resistance. It just waits. And eventually, the weight of living inside a memory became heavier than the fear of letting it go. That's when I called a realtor. Her name was Elena Castillo, recommended by a coworker who said she was patient, thorough, and unusually kind for someone in a business built on closing deals fast. I remember our first phone call. I told her, almost apologetically, that the house needed to be prepared for sale, but that I wasn't in a hurry, that there were things in it I needed time with before strangers started walking through, judging the paint colors and the size of the closets. She didn't rush me, she simply said, "Take the time you need, Daniel. Houses can wait. People can't always." That sentence stayed with me longer than I expected it to. Over the following weeks, Elena came to the house several times, first to assess it, then to help me figure out what needed fixing, what needed staging, what could stay, and what needed to go into storage. She was different from what I expected a realtor to be. She didn't talk about square footage the way a salesperson recites a script. She asked questions about the house itself, about the years we'd lived there, about which room had been my favorite. When I told her the sunroom had been Claire's, the place where she painted on weekends, where sunlight poured in every morning, Elena didn't rush past that information to talk about resale value. She sat with it for a moment and said quietly, "Then we'll make sure whoever buys this house knows how loved it was." I hadn't expected a stranger to understand that a house isn't just walls and a roof. It's a container for a life. And somehow, without trying to, Elena kept proving she understood that better than most people I'd known for years. The work of preparing the house for sale became, without my noticing, a kind of quiet therapy. Elena would come by on weekday evenings after her other appointments, and we'd go room by room. She helped me sort through Claire's things, not coldly, not efficiently, but with a gentleness that made the process bearable instead of brutal. There was an afternoon when we found a box of Claire's old sketchbooks in the sunroom closet, and instead of telling me to just donate them and move on, Elena sat on the floor with me and looked through them page by page, asking about the little cottage Claire had sketched over and over, asking if that had been a real place or a dream. It had been a dream. Claire always wanted a cottage near the coast, something small and simple, filled with light. I hadn't spoken that memory out loud to anyone since the funeral. Saying it to Elena, in that dusty sunroom with the box between us, was the first time grief felt like something I could hold instead of something holding me. Weeks passed. The house was slowly transformed, not erased of Claire, but softened, opened up, made ready for someone new to fill it with their own noise. And somewhere in that process, without a single dramatic moment I could point to, I realized I looked forward to Elena's visits for reasons that had nothing to do with real estate. I found myself noticing the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating on paperwork. The way she really laughed. Not the polished customer service kind, when my neighbor's dog kept interrupting our conversations by pressing his nose against the fence. I noticed that I was talking more, that some mornings I woke up without immediately feeling the crushing weight I'd carried since October. And that on the days Elena was scheduled to come by, that weight felt lighter before she even arrived. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself that grief plays tricks on lonely men, that gratitude for kindness can feel like something bigger than it is. I was terrified of being wrong, terrified of dishonoring Claire's memory by feeling anything at all for someone else so soon, and terrified, in a smaller and more selfish way, of being hurt again after finally starting to stand upright. The open house was scheduled for a Saturday in early spring. Elena arrived early to set everything up, fresh flowers on the kitchen counter, the lights adjusted just right, a folder of listing sheets by the door. I stayed, technically against her advice, because I couldn't bring myself to be anywhere else while strangers walked through the last physical space Claire and I had shared. I told myself I was there to answer questions about the furnace and the roof age. Really, I think I just needed to witness the house's last day as mine. Around noon, a couple in their 50s came through, admiring the kitchen renovation, running their hands along the countertop Claire had picked out years earlier. The wife turned to Elena, who was standing beside me near the window, and said, warmly, without a hint of doubt, "Your husband did a beautiful job keeping this place so well maintained. You two have wonderful taste." The words hit me like a wave I hadn't seen coming, not because they were painful, but because for one full second, before either of us corrected the mistake, something in my chest recognized the sentence as true. Something in me wanted it to be true. Elena didn't laugh it off awkwardly or rush to correct them the way I expected. She glanced at me just briefly, and there was something unreadable and warm in her expression, something that felt less like embarrassment and more like she, too, had felt that same strange pull in that same strange second. Then she turned back to the couple, smiled that calm, steady smile of hers, and said simply, "Not yet. Not no. Not. We're just working together. Not yet." The couple laughed, assuming it was a playful joke between two people who clearly had an easy rapport, and moved on toward the sunroom to admire the light. But I stood there frozen, turning those two words over and over in my mind, because they weren't a denial. They were a door left open. For the rest of that afternoon, I couldn't concentrate on anything. I kept replaying the moment, trying to decide if I had imagined the weight behind it, if I was simply a grieving man desperate to find meaning in an offhand comment. But when the last visitors left, and it was just the two of us standing in the empty kitchen, as the sun went down through the window Claire used to love, I finally asked Elena why she'd answered that way. She was quiet for a moment, arranging papers she didn't need to arrange before she finally looked up at me. She told me that in 11 years of real estate, she had walked through hundreds of homes and met hundreds of clients, and most of them were transactions polite, professional, forgettable. But this house, she said, had never felt like a transaction. She said that watching me hold Claire's memory with such tenderness, watching me slowly learn to breathe in these rooms again instead of just surviving them, had changed something in her too. She said she hadn't planned to feel anything. She said she almost talked herself out of saying, "Not yet," at all, because it felt too honest, too soon, too complicated given everything I was carrying. But it was the truest thing she could have said in that moment, because no would have been a lie, and she had promised herself a long time ago never to lie about what mattered. I won't pretend that conversation solved anything instantly, or that grief simply packed its bags and left because someone new had walked into the room. Healing doesn't work that cleanly, and if this story tried to tell you it did, it wouldn't be honest with you either. In the months that followed, there were still hard nights. There were still mornings. I reached for Claire's side of the bed, out of habit, even in the new apartment I eventually moved into. There were still moments Elena and I sat in careful silence, unsure how to build something new out of the wreckage of what I'd lost. Both of us moving slowly and deliberately, so that nothing about this felt like erasing what came before. But slowly, deliberately, something did grow. Elena never asked me to forget Claire. She asked me to remember her while still choosing to live. She was patient with the anniversaries, patient with the days I needed to be alone, patient with the version of me that sometimes still felt guilty for laughing too easily at something she said. And in that patience, I found something I hadn't expected to find again, not a replacement for what I'd lost, but proof that a heart broken that badly could still, somehow, make room for something new without betraying what came before it. The house sold 2 weeks after that open house, to a young family with 2 kids who fell in love with the sunroom the moment they walked into it. Before we handed over the keys, I stood one last time in that room where Claire used to paint. And I let myself say goodbye, not to the house, but to the chapter of my life it represented. And when I turned around, Elena was standing in the doorway, not rushing me, not saying a word, just waiting, the way she always had, for exactly as long as I needed. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever lost someone and wondered whether you were allowed to love again, or if you've ever watched someone slowly come back to life and felt honored to witness it, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who might need these words today. And before you go, I'd love to know which country are you watching this from tonight. Drop it in the comments below. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. Some doors don't close. When we lose someone we love, they just stay quietly ajar, waiting for the day we're finally ready to walk back through.